And we are live.
I think that's the most quiet we've been ever when we go live.
Oh,
So
sorry.
you've dressed up for the occasion, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
You mean dressed down? This is casual, man.
It's Casual Wednesday in Chris's life.
Usually I'm wearing my tuxedo lab coat.
He's very classy.
For certain negative values of the word classy.
Yeah. I have so many questions that I'm just trying to hold until we officially start the stream.
I
Hello, Joseph Van Tongeren.
Hello, Jos.
Hi, Jos.
Good evening.
Jos is officially well. Actually, Jos, you're back now as our number one fan. You were replaced on Friday during the Prison Arena live stream.
Yeah.
But you're back now. You're our number one fan again.
Yay!
Does he get moved up on the leadership board?
Number one in a field of one.
Yes.
Hey, that's our fan.
Yeah.
Wait, what is this sorcery we were speaking of? Okay.
Cool. So, he was on Kinderjike.
So a child something or other?
I'm assuming Dike. You know, it is the Netherlands. It's the home of such watery delights. All right.
How's everyone?
Yeah, we good?
Brilliant.
Good.
How are you guys?
Worried for the next
hour
and a bit. It's going to be like corralling kittens.
Get Chris and the guys on the stream, they said.
Yes. Bring the whole circus of freaks. Yes.
What could possibly go wrong?
Yes, we'll find out.
Yeah, we'll find out. Apparently, where Jos was, all the canals were dug out by kids from the age of 9. That's
wow.
Powerful.
Are they like small little dikes?
Man, my 9-year-old is way behind. He needs to be digging more canals.
Yeah, it's canals or going up chimneys. So, Michael, you were saying just to flag that your internet connection is spotty.
Yep. It ain't super amazing, so I apologize in advance if things start collapsing.
Yeah.
But hey,
sorry, this is like an incredible history lesson.
Yeah, it is. Where we get like a new fact every minute.
Yeah, it's like, so the kids had to do it because the adults would sink in the mud. That is incredible. See, that's why people watch the Hub Games Hangout.
That's the reason why I've been in this
stuff
chair
like that
for the
anywhere
last
else.
Flash forward 1 year to the new Hub game, all about canals and children digging them.
Well, really interesting jobs that children were made to do. Well, I think we keep us going for quite a while.
I've even got the title for you, Rory. It's Tykes and Dykes.
That's it. Trademark.
Lock it in.
You can work on that game as a historical recreation game.
I'll wait for the contract first.
Okay, I don't think anyone's going to be approaching me with that one. So normally at this point we do it. Well, this was hellos and check-ins on what everyone's been playing. So guys, do you want to do a quick check-in and hello with everyone who's watching?
Sure.
Let's start with you, Chris.
Well, hello everybody. I'm Chris Leader. I'm doing pretty well on a scale of completely freaked out to totally normal. I'm somewhere in that area. So, yeah, been playing a lot of cooperative games lately with the kids and enjoying, just trying to...
Kicking their butt.
Yeah, well, that's the whole thing. I don't enjoy getting my butt kicked by a child, so I play cooperative games with them so that we all win or lose together, you see?
Jensen is a wizard.
Yes, my son Jensen is fantastic at games, and he groks things very quickly, And then, I go from having to sort of hold back just a little bit to fighting for my life in a game just like that. So, yeah, it happens very quickly. But, we've been just doing everything we can to play as many games as possible during this wacky time.
Didn't mean to hit the back in a moment. Apologies.
I just realized I rushed ahead. We need to do our countdown intro, don't we, Michael?
I mean, we can do that after we've done it.
Okay.
After we've done the hellos and all that.
Okay. We'll do the hellos and then jump into the conversation. Chris, you and Michael should probably play against each other then, live on stream.
I would like that.
If you keep getting beaten, because then Michael can pair up with you.
Excuse me. I would like to remind sir that last Friday I won again.
You did. I had wiped that from my memory.
It's 4-2.
Fair enough. And there goes Michael. Okay, we can keep talking.
How could you win? They kick you right off.
Right. If this is gonna keep on happening every time I have a vague moment of glory, the internet decides to cut off. I'm not happy about that. All right. So yeah, I beat you on Friday. So it's 4-2. It's not quite as painful as it was previously.
Gotta say hi to Gavin. Gavin's joining us over here. Hello.
The Swedish man of board gaming.
That's Swedish, not Swedish. He's not like, I'm here to play the game.
Like the fish.
Right.
Yes.
No. Sweet-esque.
And gentlemen, may I introduce my very good friend, Kevin Rodgers?
Mm-hmm.
Hi. Well, yeah, I'm Kevin Rodgers, and my kids and I have been playing a lot of Unmatched lately. And we actually busted out the original Train Maker that Chris designed so many years ago, like the Game Crafter version, because that's my daughter's favorite game. So yeah, but we've been playing just anything we can to keep it moving, and been some puzzles involved, and just trying to keep things rolling forward.
How old are your kids, Kev?
My kids are 11 and just turned 16. Actually, on Sunday, my son turned 16. So.
The old man.
Yeah, and he's already a little bit taller than I am. I'm 6'5", he's 6'7.5" already. So he chooses to rub that in every chance he gets. So shout out to Aiden and Emma.
Excellent. So Ken, do you want to do a quick intro and let us know what you've been playing as well?
Well, we have been doing a lot of prototyping lately and designing, but on the tabletop, we've been playing My City. We're in just finished chapter 6 of 8. Also played the Princess Bride book adventure game. And let's see, looking over at the pile here. Yes, we've also been playing a lot of Quacks of Quedlinburg and some Stone Age. Get a little retro in there because we have a soft spot in our heart for Stone Age. Nice.
We were talking about we were talking last week about some of Michael's favorite games, and he was mentioning Agricola, and I was mixing it up with Caverna, which I've been told to play because I was never a huge fan of Agricola.
I tell you, I just never got into Agricola. It felt too much like working for survival. Oh boy, I get to have a child so that I can have them till the fields. Yeah.
The other thing that my family's been playing quite a bit of during this, and I don't mean this as a plug of any sort of hub game, because I won't do that kind of thing. But they've been playing.
First spit take at 2:09 p.m. Eastern time.
Plugs are quite awful.
Yes, quite. No, we've been playing blank like crazy during this, and it's what's nice is whenever we do get together with somebody else who's in the bubble and quarantined, and then we're able to get together, we will play some blank, and then we've been able to add some new cards from other people, and we're getting to that point where we're starting to see cards come up that we completely forgot about from forever ago, and you go, oh yeah, I forgot about that. So we've been having a really good time with blank, and it's helped through a lot of stuff. My daughter's into her Trolls Uno, but she'll play blank like crazy, and she's now moving over, and I'm like, good.
Excellent.
Well, if you're doing shameless promotion, I will then say, if you'd like to try and win a copy of Blank, why not head over to any of our social media, which is at We Are Hub Games, where this week we're giving away 5 copies, and you could be the lucky winner of one of them. Find the links across our social media.
Wow.
Now, if you had gone full screen with that, Michael, it would have been perfect.
Nah, it's Chris.
Wow.
Don't scare the children away.
Yes, no.
All right, how about this? Join us across our social media whenever you can. It'll be an absolute pleasure, and thank you. There you go.
The more you know.
It's like trying to pat your head and rub your tummy.
I can't unsee that. That's my... Oh. Okay.
No, but it actually, you make a good point, Chris. It kind of is a perfect game when you're locked in together, because you'll actually get to see it morph and change as you're playing it.
Yeah, we for a long time my set was a traveling set that I would use at conventions. So Ken has some cards in there from Grand Con, and so I've got cards from different people when I would go to shows. Well, those don't exist these days. So it's been nice to be able to kind of have a new thrust and have the family really inventing a lot of cards. So it's good. And they took it with them when they went and visited their grandma a while back, and they came back, and I haven't even seen them all, but I have to discover because they're teaching the rules to their grandma who's never played and making up cards. And I'm like, these are going to be either the most OP cards you've ever seen in your life, or they're going to make no sense to the game at all, but I can't wait to come across them. It's going to be great.
Excellent. It's like someone, just builds this surprise deck for you to play with, and you have no idea what you're going to encounter in it.
Yeah, when it comes up, you're like, what?
What do you mean I had to give you $3,000?
You immediately win the game? That's not right.
At our house, I did take the precaution of adding in 3 cards that say, lock up all the cutting knives. Because it does get a little cabin feverish over here after 8 months of no game nights.
Yeah, new faces and new blood are very good these days. It feels good. Oh, Ken Grazier's around. What's up,
He's
Ken?
here. I was talking to him earlier on and playing his new game.
Can we all do our 40-year-old version of Ken's photo for just a second? Can we do an impression looking off into the distance wistfully? Thank you for indulging me. I appreciate that. That's your screenshot for the thing later, I think. It's perfect.
Yeah, that's the one that Facebook will choose as the placeholder.
We'll do whenever there's technical difficulties, we'll just have a picture of Ken's face. Technical difficulties. We'll be right back. And it's like,
yes.
Do you want to start the countdown then?
All right.
And we'll officially start.
All right, so we'll be kicking off the show properly after this wonderful countdown. Prepare yourselves and see you in a minute. Out of everybody who was going to be throwing moves, I didn't think it was going to be Ken who was being the
Ken
most
can cut
impressive.
a rug, man. He can cut a rug.
He can shake it.
I told you I locked up all the cutting knives, Chris.
Shears.
Anyway, it is time to make this thing happen. It is coming up on 7:15 in the UK, 8:15 in Central Europe, and 2:15 in the afternoon, the East Coast of America. It is time for another Hub Games Hangout on a Wednesday. I am one of your cordial hosts, the real Michael J. Fox. I will be changing my name in a moment. Over there, Rory O'Connor. Hello, sir.
Hey, everybody.
And 3, 2 special guests and Chris Leader.
Yeah.
Who forced his way in.
It's true.
Just
can't argue.
Could be coming in here. So we have with us today 3 beautiful examples of humanity, 2 beautiful examples of humanity. Ken and Kevin, and I guess Chris is here as well. So there we go. So the 3 of them together are the masterminds behind Back to the Future Dice Through Time from the nice folks at Ravensburger. And we are going to be talking about, surprise, surprise, time travel and its ramifications for board gaming. No, that will be a lie, but that would be also quite awesome.
Love that conversation.
That's on the Patreon.
I liked it.
I liked to travel in time to access.
I liked this talk the first time I was in it.
Yeah, it was really good. Let's see if the third one holds up.
Well, I'm here to steer it in the correct direction this time around.
Actually, I think that would be a really awesome conversation to talk about games that handle that emulate time travel and all that sort of stuff, because there's so many of them out there, but they all handle it so differently. It would be really cool to do it. But what we're going to do today,
this message just handed to me.
Oh, hello. So today, we're going to be talking about designing within IP, intellectual property, because, of course, you 3 came together to do Back to the Future, which is one of my favorite movies of all time for probably quite obvious reasons. And it's also, I know, Chris, it's one of your favorite movies of all time for sure.
Yes, yes,
because we've had discussions about it previously. Kevin and Ken, I don't know if it's up there on your top 10 list, but I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. Very much so.
I've known Chris forever, since middle school, and when I was younger, I used to think I was the biggest Back to the Future fan in the world. I absolutely loved it. And then I started having a conversation with Chris, and I realized I didn't know anything about anything when it came to it.
And he's probably not exaggerating. That may have been the very first conversation we ever had. He may have come up and been like, hey, which way is it to the gym? And I was probably like, in part 2, Marty was going to go to 1955. So probably just went crazy with Back to the Future. He was like, wow, this guy's not only crazy, but I think I'm going to be friends with him for a long time.
Yeah, which is a delight. All right, so before we go into the actual conversation, we have to get the elephant in the room out of the way. We will kick off with Ken for this one.
Yes.
Which of the trilogy is the best movie? 1, 2, or 3?
My personal favorite is 2, because they essentially had a second weave through of 1 to survive. They had to let the first movie survive without being altered and take care of the rest of the problems. So they not only had to fix the time the time in 1985, but they also had to make sure they didn't screw anything up further in 1955. And I thought that was very well handled.
Good stuff and well reasoned. Kevin, next to you.
This is always a tough one because each of them have their own just awesome merits. I mean, the sci-fi stuff alone and the things Ken's were talking about make 2 brilliant. The fact that 3 is kind of almost like a mirror image of 1, instead of it being Marty who's the protagonist that's driving everything, it's Doc, and they're going through similar things. But to me, the first Back to the Future is almost an absolute perfect piece of cinema. It's just a masterclass in terms of how to make a movie and everything like that. So for me, it's the original for me.
Self-professed expert, Professor Chris Leader.
I concur with my colleague Kevin. I believe that while 2 is brilliant because the sci-fi aspect of it and weaving back into the first film, I mean, we use that for our game for sure, rippling through time and doing all these things. There's something about the first one. Yeah, it is a classic film. Everything about it works perfectly, and so I think that there's a lot of heart in the first one, a lot of little moments of humor and humanity that are in the first one that the second one is just so breathless in how it moves. They don't quite get to those moments quite as well, although it does have the guy going, I think he stole that guy's wallet. I love that guy. But yeah, I think for me it's 1, and then it's 3, and then it's 2, only because 1 and 3 have a little bit more heart than 2. But as far as just being amazingly technologically cool, the second one is a lot of fun too. But again, these are very close because this entire trilogy is so near and dear to my heart.
Yeah, a lot of people put down number 3, but I agree with Kevin talking about. I think that 3 is a perfect bookend in that it fills in all of the tropes that really weren't in 1 and 2. It was much more romantic, a lot more thoughtful about, where are we in the universe and all of that. Great movies, all 3 of them.
It's a beautiful thing. Rory, as somebody who doesn't have a vested interest in Back to the Future, what's your favorite of the 3? I'm assuming you've seen all 3.
This is where Rory says he's never seen the films before, and we go, what?
Back to the what? So I was a huge Huey Lewis and the News fan at the time. So I think partly because of this. So I had like the soundtrack. I had the Panini sticker album. Michael, you would know this.
Yeah, baby.
And I think I nearly filled the whole thing. Like that's how much of a Back to the Future fan I was. I've never been the person to remember like moments in a movie, but I'm stalling. Yeah, probably the first one, and this was reinforced because I did a script writing course, and they featured the opening scene of Back to the Future in that course, and they explained how that opening scene sets up everything that happens in the movie. And when I saw that, I was like, oh my god, this is just genius the way they've done it.
Yep, absolutely.
But I agree. I think 3 is probably my next favorite. Apart from, and I've forgotten the band's name, that
ZZ Top
feature in it, when ZZ Top when they're playing the guitar, I was like, oh, they've broken it with that. But everything else I loved.
Oh, when they spun the guitar around like ZZ Top does. Yeah, they did.
We had Jones Family Game Night doubting you there, Rory, but no, I think you've proven your allegiance to the powerfulness that is Back to the Future.
I probably know the song. I know the songs better than the movie. I know the songs better than the movie. There's a song that plays when his alarm clock goes off in the middle of the night, and it's like one of my favorite songs of all time. I can't remember the name of it right now, but it like evokes feelings in me whenever I hear that one.
It's a great soundtrack. You have some Eric Clapton in there. You got Lindsey Buckingham is in there. I mean, there's actually some really good music in that besides Huey Lewis and Alan Silvestri's theme.
That's all good. Yeah, I'm going to go with number 1 as well because I was 10 when Back to the Future came out. Everybody knows that my real full name is Michael J. Fox, and in our family we use our initials. So yeah, that was an interesting couple of years of getting the hell beaten out of school. But the film made up for it because it's weird because you look back at like a lot of 80s cinema and like those legendary classic movies that we all hold near and dear to our hearts, and we see a lot of them through those rose-tinted lenses. Like when the Ghostbusters remake happened, for example, and loads of people were going, oh, my childhood is ruined, blah, blah, blah. It's just like you go back and you watch Ghostbusters, and it's essentially a 1980s sex comedy. And a lot of people forget that. Whereas Back to the Future is a surprisingly innocent but beautifully told story. But it does have, a little bit of like the adult stuff in there as well. Like any time that Marty is anywhere near his mum in 1955,
it's a little cringy. It can get cringy, yeah. I mean,
yeah. It's just listen, like, Jesus, you smoke too. Just
mind if
I have a lot of time for it. 2, a technical masterpiece because they didn't know there was going to be a second movie, and the fact they managed to interweave everything so perfectly is lovely.
One of my favorite lines that the filmmakers said: "If we knew we were going to make a sequel, we never would have put the girlfriend into the car because it limited what they could do." They're like, "Why in the world did they do that?" Thanks, Ken.
Ken keeping the tracker there.
Yes.
Two is great. 2 is a great movie, and 3 is lovely as well. But yeah, I watched 2 again.
All right.
I mean, a long time, a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, they're all good. It's all good. All right. With that very important information out of the way, tell us a little bit about the game. Right? Imagine you do actually get to go to a convention this year. I know. How would you pitch the game?
Yeah.
So specifically, this game, this Back to the Future Dice Through Time, or
yeah.
Okay, so with this one, there's actually a little bit of a prologue to this story, and that is that there was a time where I called up Kev and I said, what if we could make a Back to the Future game? You know, not that it's ever going to happen, but what if we could? What would we want that game to look like? And this was just an exercise in game design. This was just a, pie in the sky thought. And so we sat around one afternoon and we kind of came up with, okay, what needs to be in the game? Marty and Doc and the DeLorean and Hill Valley. And what we came to the realization of is, okay, so let's say this game were a competitive game. There were 4 players. Rory, if you're the first player, what character are you going to choose?
Doc, probably.
Right. Okay, so if you take Doc, then Michael, who are you going to take?
I'm going to be me.
Right, so you're going to be Marty. Now, who's the third player supposed to be? Assuming, of course, that Biff is a bad guy in the game, you're not going to play as Biff. So who are you going to play as? One of Marty's parents? Einstein the dog? We just couldn't make it make sense. So one of the first things that we thought of was, well, it should be a cooperative game, and everyone should get to play as Marty and Doc, but from different points in the timeline. And we were like, mind blown. That's amazing. Yeah, that's great. So we had this whole idea that we had started coming up with about how you could travel through the times and find misplaced items. And so we came up with kind of an idea for the game, and then we put it on the shelf because there's no way in the wide world that we're ever going to be able to make a Back to the Future game, so why waste more energy on it? It was just a fun exercise. Flash forward a couple of years, we got the call from Ravensburger.
So hang on, I'm going to cut across there because you were basically answering my question before I got to ask it.
Sorry.
So how long ago was this when you were initially kicking around that idea?
I would say about 2.5, 3 years ago, right, Kev?
Okay.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right.
Yeah, I would say, and it was, we put it in dust, on the shelf, and it collected dust for a while.
In the binder with the other hundreds of. We'll get back to that one.
The many, many, many other games. Yeah, so it was a while ago, and then I got to know Mike Mulvihill through Calliope Games. That's the publisher that I work for. We published a game that he designed, and I got to know Mike, and he's a wonderful guy. He was working for Ravensburger, and he had asked me, and Ken, actually, would you guys ever want to design games for Ravensburger? Now, this is during the height of them coming up with Jaws and Jurassic Park and these wonderful movie games that were proving that you could make games based on IPs that were actually really good games. And so Ken and I both separately said yes. So they reached out to us a while later and said, we've got some games, just wanted to know for a whole bunch of people if you're interested. And one of them was Back to the Future. So I think by that point we'd gotten Kevin under NDA because I called up the two of them and I'm like trembling, like we can make a Back to the Future game. You guys have to help me. We got to make this thing. It's got to be good. It's got to be good. I can't screw this up, you guys. So
that is almost exactly how his voice sounded over the phone. And you could hear the phone vibrating.
And this was, just so you know how important this was to me, this was on my son's birthday. My son, who's 9 now, he would have been just turned 8, I guess. Mm-hmm. So I probably shoved his birthday cake off the table and ran to go make this phone call to these guys because I'd gotten this email that said, hey, would you like to make a Back to the Future game? So I left him crying on his birthday so I could call these guys and ask if they would help me make this game. And so, of course they were like, yeah. And the very first thing we thought of was that game that me and Kev had begun that was about 25% done. That would be a good foundation for this thing. Mm-hmm. So we don't work together very well. As you can tell, we're all very serious people who are introverts. We don't care about each other much. We are always serious. Mm-hmm. But anyway, we we put all of our skills together, and it was a lot of things. Like at the time, it was kind of a card-driven game. We decided to make it dice, and Ken was very good about coming in and finding spots where he looked at it from the outside and said, "Why are you doing this?" And we would go, "I don't have an answer for that, so it's going away. So now we're not going to do that." And the collaboration was fantastic. And then we started putting together the thing. Now, Ravensburger had just asked for like a 2-page pitch document. That's all you got to give us.
In 3 weeks.
In 3 weeks, we need a pitch document. We had, within 2 weeks, a fully playable game, an entire rule sheet that was like edited and perfect. So when we sent them the email saying we've got this for you, we really had to scale back from where we were and say, hey, here's the stuff that you need, but if you really want it, we have a game, we have a rule set, we have a how to play video, we have a whole game playthrough video. Anything you need, we've got. And it actually worked well, because when Universal was looking at these games, they were able to ask us for those things and show, just kind of the overview of everything, and it helped them out so much. So later on, they said, "Thank you for doing all that. We didn't expect you to, but it was wonderful." And I was like, "I don't think we could have done it any other way. It's Back to the Future."
And the thing that was, I think, in hindsight, in time travel parlance, so cool about it is that we were doing Zoom before there was Zoom. Chris would jerry rig his phone, so he's looking down on the table, and these two guys are in Illinois and I'm in Michigan, and we would get together 3 or 4 times a week and play test the game over iPhone video or Messenger video. And that's how most of the development of the game and the testing worked a year before the pandemic happened.
And I think that works quite well with co-op games as well. Like if it's set up where one person can manage the board state information and then kind of share it with everyone else. So how was that working remotely on the game? Like what worked and what were the challenges?
Well, I think that one worked really well too, because there's no hidden information.
Right.
We have since, Ken especially has come very far in developing on Tabletop Simulator and Tabletopia, so that if we were doing it today, we could have a fully playable, version through Tabletop Simulator that we could test remotely as well. But I would say that we were able to do it. I think obviously the most difficult thing probably was poor Ken's eyes getting a strain when he was trying to read specific symbols on different cards. But you could speak more to that, Ken.
And that's why I got the Braille attachment to my computer monitor here, so that it wasn't that bad. The resolution of our phones was good enough that we could play it pretty well.
The hardest part, I think, was when we had those breakthroughs, and Chris and I are in one room jumping up and down because we're like, "Hey, we fixed it," and all we hear is Ken jumping up and down, but he wasn't there with us. So that was the only really bad part, is that he couldn't physically be there with us to do it. But it was a great experience from top to bottom, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, we are still close enough. We're only about 3 hours away. So there were 2 or 3 times when I drove over and we'd have an intense session, and those are always wonderful.
So essentially you'd been working on the game on the side and you were approached by Ravensburger, who had the IP, which I'm guessing had come to them via Universal.
Yeah, because they'd done at that point, Horrified had been announced, the Jaws game had been announced.
Yeah,
that first wave of Universal properties had come out.
They had
we've seen them at Nuremberg anyway.
Yeah, from what I understand, they had a good relationship with Universal, and a good relationship with Target as well. Target was doing a lot of those as limited exclusives. So Universal wanted to continue the relationship. Target wanted to continue the relationship. So this was just the latest in that line, and we just happened to come in at just the right moment. And to their credit, we worked with a gentleman named Steve Warner, who has been in the gaming industry for a while. A fantastic guy, and he was new as a producer at Ravensburger. He'd come over from, I think it was Wizards of the Coast or something, but he'd come from somewhere else. And we were like, us, along with a couple of other games, were his first batch of games to produce. So I don't want to, ring our bell or anything, but I think we helped make his job very easy for this one. I can't speak to the other two games. Maybe they were nightmares, but at least he could be, at the end of the night, he could be like, well, Back to the Future's on track, that's for sure, because those guys are crazy.
So
every time his phone dinged, he probably just assumed it was one of us.
Oh, want to talk about hoverboards again? Great.
So I know from working on story cubes and working with various IPs, like were you given a list of like do's and don'ts from the beginning, or like what were kind of some interesting or surprising things that came out in terms of you exploring the IP and from a game perspective?
Yeah, actually, can I add something to that as well? So were there any specific areas of the IP that you weren't allowed to touch, or specific areas that, like, they said you have to have this in there somewhere? What
part of
yes and no?
What part of the concept of NDA are you having trouble grasping here? No, they give you.
Once the product's out, NDAs are dead.
No, they came out with a short paragraph, 6 or 7 lines. It said, "These are the directions we want you to go," and we'd rather you not go this direction. But it was very general, and left us lots of leeway.
Yeah, and the nice thing was it synced up not only with what we had in mind, but what we would have wanted to do with a Back to the Future game. So it said things like, encompass the entire trilogy. Don't make it about any one movie. Make it about all of them. Respect what happened in the films. And, I think the idea was it's going to celebrate the movies. It's not like a new adventure where Doc and Marty hop in the DeLorean and go back to Prohibition-era Chicago. It's what happens in the films. And I think because of what we already had, come up with in the past, we were already thinking along those lines. So I don't know. I will say this. What we heard later was that when they sent out the request for people to send pitches, multiple designers, people of people that everyone knows, would reach out to Ravensburger and say, well, have you reached out to Chris Leader? Because they knew I was going to probably try my hat at it. And afterwards, it was wonderful to have people like Paul Peterson come up and say, like, Chris, I'm so glad you put it in a game, because I was worried to do it. And I was like, wow, that's kind of weirdly gratifying to hear, I guess.
One of the other things that hit straight off is we wanted to make Hill Valley one of the characters of the game.
100%.
That's why the board is Hill Valley in all 4 years. And the iconic plot items starring, because we knew we weren't going to get real character art looking like all the characters.
We didn't have the character likenesses. There was no.
They had character licenses, which directed the art style. But the point is we couldn't make it about the emotions and interactions of the relationships. It had to be about what they did, and that's why you've got all of the items prominently featured. Plus, it's with that, it's a great memory trigger. Say, oh yeah, I remember when they were there and they had the rain and it automatically stopped because of the weather time. That it just helped people connect back to the trilogy.
Yeah, the only thing I think that we actually weren't 100% sure, and we held our breath a little bit, was for the DMC on the DeLorean. That was the one thing we weren't sure if we were going to be able to get or not, because you've seen some Back to the Future licensed stuff and they don't have the DMC. So when we got the word that the DMC was going to be on there, that was a good day.
Yeah, it was. There were lots of little touches like that they really went above and beyond to try to make sure that they got all of the, everything that needs to be there. And that also, we kept hearing rumors as we were developing it that they would like as a promo item the train from the end of the third one, the Jules Verne train. And then, for that to actually come to life and be a promo item that they created, and I was like, oh, that's wonderful.
Sorry, Stefan just brought up my Back to the Future stuff.
Oh, there you go. Nice.
And
you've got the Lego. Yep.
Gotta love the Lego DeLorean. It's one of my favorite Lego pieces of all time.
You mean these time trains, Chris?
Yes. We're showing off toys. Show off my little Playmobil DeLorean.
Ooh, very nice.
The Playmobil DeLorean that actually lights up. Wow! And if we're really showing off stuff, I got to show this off because this is unique. This is different. Nobody else except for me and Ken and Kev have this because Ken made this himself for our dice game. Ken made Mr. Fusion dice towers.
They are very, very cool.
Yeah. Yes. So,
well,
yeah.
If we're kind of like doing nods, so we live in the home of the DeLorean. They're made here in Northern Ireland. They were made here in Northern Ireland.
They were.
Which blew my mind when I first learned that. I was like, Northern Ireland makes something futuristic.
Well,
yeah, so there's been days a couple of years ago where you'd be walking through the city centre and a DeLorean would drive by, and it's just this kind of weird, like, double take.
Yeah, it's just a thing that happens around here, which is really delightful. Also, if you ever get, like, folks at home, if you ever get the chance to read into the story of John DeLorean, the guy who founded the company, please do so. It is a wild ride.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Wild ride.
What's always forgotten is he was actually acquitted of all charges, but he's always known as just this cocaine smuggling criminal. But he's it just shows how the story is much bigger than the ending, right?
Oh, very much so. Very much so. So, with regards to, it's interesting that you were talking about the fact that you didn't have the character likenesses, like the actor licenses. So I've only been involved in one game that had. Actually, no, that's a lie. I've been involved in a couple of games that had IP stuff. Like Princess Bride was obviously a big one that I was involved with for a bit, and also Fast and the Furious, which was a sort of like a racing game, like a top-down racing game. But oh my god, I remember the back and forth because each one of the actors. So there were 8 like characters in the game, and each one of the actors were represented by a completely different agent across 3 different agencies. So each one of those had to have individually negotiated contracts within the confines of the game, and some people said, yes, you can use my face. Some people said, no, you can't use my face. God, it was a minefield. Were there any sort of like, I mean, I don't know how much you sort of like saw of the back end for like Ravensburger and Universal, but was there anything you sort of like heard or sort of like were aware of potential minefields that you might sort of like be stepping into?
We had the same thing with Einstein's agent. Man, he was
a nightmare.
Dog. What a diva.
Oh, man.
No, I don't think we had much to do with any of that. When it came to us, it was pretty well baked, and it seemed like the rule that they got was if it appeared in the film outside of like likenesses for the faces, if it appeared in the film, they had the rights to use it. Going forward just a little bit later, when they made a trailer for the game, which is a fantastic cinematic trailer, they didn't have the music. So they had sound-alike music. It was like, it was like not quite right. And it was like within 24 hours of when it was going to go live, Universal actually called them up and said, hey, we'll go ahead and let you license the music from Back to the Future. So it took this amazing trailer, and then it made it so much more authentic because it actually had the theme music to it. And that all happened really, last minute. But you've worked with IP holders, you've worked with licenses, it's always precarious. It's always, and I don't know, you obviously have published, that side of it, but I designed a game for a license once that fell apart before it ever existed. And it was after we'd gone way down the road for it. So I know that it's, to me, with Back to the Future, and because I'd been through that with a certain Merc with a Mouth license that I was supposed to make a game for with Upper Deck, when that fell apart, I mean, it stung for a long time. So this entire ride with Back to the Future, it was like every night you go to sleep thinking the next day you're going to get that call saying, well, rights are gone, we're not making this game. Rights are gone, we're not making this game. So
yeah, because all it takes is even the smallest perceived slight from somebody on that side of the fence to just go kill it. This thing's over.
There is a long story that we hate to get into, but there's a long story.
Let's go there.
There was another Back to the Future game being created at the exact same time that ended up being another Back to the Future cooperative dice.
So game. This is really curious, and I was going to get to it at some point. So let's dig into it now.
Let's just head right into it. Let's just deal with it head on.
We can do it.
It's because it's part of the whole licensing process. And kind of the point of this talk is to kind of inform people a little bit of, almost like if you were to go get involved in licensing, these are things to kind of be aware of. Usually when you license something, you license it under like a category or a heading. So, when we used to do Story Cubes, it was a storytelling game, right? So theoretically, we had the license on making a storytelling game based on Batman or Looney Tunes or those things. So I'm assuming Ravensburger signed a license for like a board game, because otherwise it would be a card game. That's how finely they slice it, but I can't imagine it getting sliced more finely than that. So it kind of seems weird that there was two board games coming out at the same time.
It's a very long story, and we only got to see bits and pieces of it, so we don't know the whole thing. I certainly don't want to upset anyone with it, and we wish everybody well all across the board. For me, it's all about having good Back to the Future games. When you're talking about the business side of things, what I'll say is we don't call ours a board game. We call ours a cooperative dice game. That's where ours lives. That's where it very specifically has to live. We can't call it a board game. But ours, I will say this, from the word go, ours was and was meant to be a cooperative dice game. Now, any other games that may exist may not have started where they were. They may have morphed into another cooperative dice game, and that goes into the whole thing of the licensor. Sometimes the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing with those things. And so you guys are nodding. 100% how this works. You talk to one person, but that's your contact. And then there's somebody else who's doing something else, and they don't know, they don't talk. And then when they finally do, you've passed the point of no return on both of the products. And it's like, oh, okay, I guess that's what we're doing then. So,
and this is kind of the reality of licensing, is that the licensor, so the person who kind of holds the license, they are trying to wring as much money out of their IP as they possibly can.
Especially in a narrow window like this, where it was the 35th anniversary of Back to the Future. This is when the most attention will be paid. It's not like Batman or something where it'll have a long point. At this point, they're like, we have a narrow window. We want to cash in on this for sure.
Yeah. And they'll, I had it where they were kind of like, and would you like this? And would you like this? And we can throw in this one as well. And you're like, no, let me just work on these, because with story
you get an IP and you get an IP. And you get an IP.
Do you want to make a dexterity game and a dice game and a card game?
Yeah. I was very conscious with Rory Story Cubes that I wanted to pick licenses that actually kind of weren't the hotness, but had a big universe in which you could create tales. But yeah, I get how finally that the definition of what it is you're licensing is so fine, and it's like, so if anyone is ever negotiating over a license, get really clear on what it is you're getting to produce, and figure out what everyone else is doing.
A point cannot happen where you sort of go, do you know what? Maybe I don't want to use dice in this. Maybe I just want it to be entirely card driven, because no, your licensing agreement will very specifically say that you can't do that. And it's just sort of like, well, looks like that agreement's out the window. It's a tightrope to walk.
Well, I wouldn't even call it a tightrope. I would call it a game of Sonic Jenga, where every phone call, hey, they approved us to do this. Hey, these people had a meeting. Oh, then they want this in the rule. And everything you say is pulling a block out and putting it on top. And you get closer and closer, and it gets more and more precarious. I can't tell you the number of times after it was signed that Chris had to pull me over and said, "Ken, don't say anything else." Okay, Chris.
Yeah,
because I did not know we were playing Sonic Jenga. Now I know how to play Sonic Jenga.
well, and there's no rules to Sonic Jenga. It changes all the time. Sometimes it's vertical, sometimes it's horizontal, sometimes it's upside down. It changes from day to day. So we were outsiders looking in, though. So for us as designers, what we were seeing was, submit this. It's looking pretty good. We're supposed to have a meeting, and then we wouldn't hear anything for a long time. And every day our souls would die a little bit inside because we'd be like, "What's happening?" And then they would come back and say, "We think we've got this thing locked up." And so we submitted it when did we submit it?
I think we submitted the prototype in March or April.
That's correct.
We didn't get the official thumbs up, you've been, approved, we're making this, until we were at Gen Con, when the Ravensburger team came over to our booth, our Calliope booth, and
I saw you about 15 minutes after that.
Tears streaming
you
down.
were super excited, and you said that you couldn't tell me anything about it. But then I said, "Come on, you got to tell me. You got to give me something." And you went, "Time travel." I went, "Back to the Future," and you just went, "I can't say anything," and then you ran away.
Yeah, that tracks. That's about right. Yeah.
But then we had the discussion about, "Oh man, next year at Gen Con, you're going to have a DeLorean at Gen Con, and I'm going to be able to sit in it and everything." It's just like, so fast forward 12 months.
Yeah. Well, I'll say this. So Cassidy over there at Ravensburger, they have already gotten that DeLorean. It's a hovering DeLorean. The wheels are actually folded down, so you take pictures. It actually looks like it's hovering. And if Gen Con happens next year, they're moving it to next year. They're still going to have this thing. So it's just one of the many wonderful 2020 things that happened during the release of our game. But big hullabaloo, a big to do.
So, Kevin, I'm wondering, in working on the game and like you all being such super fans, was there anything that you had to kind of convince Ravensburger and by extension Universal that this was a really good idea to include in the game?
Not really. And I don't want to speak for this with other IPs, but for ours, it was a pretty great relationship with Ravensburger. It was one of those weird things where we would have a session and we'd go over something. We'd be like, "This doesn't feel right. What if X was actually Y?" And then we would get an email after we were done from Steve at Ravensburger saying, "Hey guys, I don't know if X works. Can we make it into Y?" And it was like candy. It was weird. It was a lot of times. There were a few things that were like, "I don't know if that's going to work." And then we tried it. We're like, "No, that works great."
Wait. There's one thing, though, and I'm going to let Kev tell you. There's one thing that he wanted in the game so badly that we couldn't actually fit in there. This is, if you know, Back to the Future.
We're still going to figure out a way. You know how in 1985, on the far right side of the board at the mall, it's Twin Pines Mall, which is where they meet where he discovers the DeLorean. But at the end of the movie, because Marty runs over the pine tree,
it's Lone Pine Mall. Yeah.
So I thought I was killing myself trying to figure out a way to turn that into Lone Pine Mall, so that after you play it, it can be Lone Pine Mall. It start out as Twin Pine Mall, but then change it, and we just never.
So like a legacy element.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what you get the sticker out and put it on there.
But you need a promo card. It's some achievement that you can put onto it.
That's right.
See?
Afterwards.
Yeah, I was also hoping that there would, be enough legs that we could do an expansion that included a fifth timeline, which is Biff's Casino 1985.
Well, you could always put a tile down to overwrite 1985 and make it.
Well, and then part of the game is to get that fixed while you're doing all the other stuff.
Right.
So.
Oh yeah, let's start brainstorming.
It's already in Chris's journal.
I foresee no problems with this whatsoever.
And because I think that's one of the interesting things about time travel is that idea of fixing events, seeing them change and then having to kind of undo them or them cascading forward. I think, Michael, we've had lots of airport conversations about matters such as this. Like, how would you recreate that in a game as well?
Yeah, like I said before we kicked off the show proper, I would love to do an episode in the future about like time travel and time manipulation mechanisms in games, because it's one of my favorite things. Like if something that you do in space A has a ripple effect to space B and then to space C. It's like there was an old game called Kronos from ages and ages ago.
Looney Labs. In fact, there was a Back to the Future version of.
Oh no, that's Chrononauts.
Oh,
that's
I'm sorry.
but yeah, Kronos was like this big box, like early 2000s Euro game. But like you would build a pyramid or a temple in Era 1 on the Era 1 board. And then Era 2, it was you'd then put it in the same place, sort of like a more broken down version of it. Then Era 3, you'd put like a fully wrecked, ruinous version of it, which was like really lovely, sort of like conceptually, but the game itself was not amazing.
Okay.
But yeah, it's interesting you brought up the Back to the Future card game, like their version of the Chrononauts from Looney Labs, because obviously that doesn't have anything to do with the storylines of the movies at all. It's all new characters that they introduced themselves.
Well, and that informed part of what we originally talked about, because in the game you take a character card and you play as Marlene McFly III, who exists sometime way off in the future, or you're Emmett L. McFly, who's Marty's great-great-grandson or something like that. And the idea is you're trying to manipulate the timeline just the way you think it should be, and then you lock time that way. And the way you lock time is by preventing Doc from inventing time travel in the first place by stopping him from banging his head on the edge of the sink when he's hanging a clock in 1955, so he doesn't take up the flux capacitor. Which always drove me insane, because if you uninvented time travel, everything would revert to the way it was before anything happened. And I think Andy even acknowledged that once. He's like, "Yeah, we just needed some way to shut it down." So it was like so when we made up ours, we're like, okay, we never want to ever get to a point where we're going, well, it just sort of makes sense. We were like,
you call it hand waving, Rory.
Yeah.
Like there's just
Michael knows the amount of times I sit when we're working on something, and if ever that is used to explain something, it's just like, nope.
We will not adhere to the Mystery Science Theater 3000 rule of, if you're wondering how he eats and breathes and other science facts, just repeat yourself. It's just a show. I should really just relax. No, we're not going to do that. It has to make sense.
I've gotten better at it. It must be said. I have gotten better.
Good.
At it. It's all right.
You just preempt my look.
It's just like, now this ain't going to work. Throw it out the window. Gone. Done. Dusted. So was there anything you wanted to put in the game that didn't make it? Like sat left on the cutting room floor, as it were? I mean, obviously there was the time train, which would have been lovely to have had in at some point.
Tell them about the reward markers and how those developed.
Oh, you mean the Einstein markers?
Well, that's what they ended up as.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we wanted to do is we, in our super fan geek moments, we're like, man, wouldn't it be great if, Leah Thompson ever got to take a look at this and be like, hey, am I in the game? We wanted to put every character in there. So the Einstein tokens were initially characters from the movie. They were, George and Lorraine and Goldie Wilson and Mr. Strickland or Principal Strickland and everybody. So we would use those and they would help you out in different ways. We realized pretty quickly that while we wanted to do that, it didn't really make much sense. So Chris came up with the brilliant brainstorm of making it Einstein who fetches you all the help that you need and stuff like that. So
yeah, they said, look, guys, we love the idea of having these characters on here, but these tokens are going to be this big.
Yeah.
And you want to have it say like Lorraine with like a picture and like a quote. They're like, there's just no way. So for a while, what were we calling? We were just calling them reward tokens. And Ken, who is as you can see, is a very calm, very rational person. Whenever we would say reward tokens, he would get angry and break things and rampage around because he's like, that doesn't make any sense. I hate that. That's terrible. Reward tokens is so bland. Even now, I can see
my medication is working much better now.
Yeah, the vein is bulging when I say reward tokens right now. So coming up with the idea of Einstein, where it could be something from, it was, he's running, he's going to get you some help that you needed. It made a lot more sense. So I don't know that we really had to leave anything on the cutting room floor. There were definitely different, there were event cards and things that we didn't get to use when we had to kind of thin the deck a little bit. But I think we incorporated everything in there that we wanted to.
And Chris is a real stickler for games being fun, positive experiences. You don't want to have parts of the game where you're all going, ugh, I hate this part. I can't do anything. Oh, it's terrible. And that's one of the reasons why Biff, he's a two-dimensional standee, because he really is a two-dimensional concept in the game.
Mm-hmm.
His entire role in the game is to get in the way. But he's not a real antagonist.
Yeah, he's an obstacle. In the movies, he's an obstacle. He's someone who gets in the way that has to be dealt with so that you can move on and the plot can advance. And that's how we treated him in the game.
Yeah, but there are moments where, is he going, like when he's getting ready to run Marty over with the sedan while they're in the tunnel. There are truly moments when it looks like Biff's going to win, and we didn't want any of those.
We wanted to make sure we simulated the suspense.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, the suspense is real.
So, I'm watching the clock, and one thing I wanted to just ask all of you, like, if you can give one element of the game that you're really proud of, or you can't wait for players to discover, and it all has to be a different thing. So essentially, you get to pitch the game 3 times.
Well, I will say the thing that I'm sorry, I'm going to steal it, I guess. I think that you talked about time travel before. We don't have a lot of, if you affect the space in 1885, it's going to change something in 2015. We don't have a lot of direct, changing of time that way. But what we did want to hit on was that idea of writing a letter to yourself in the past and then picking it up in the future. We wanted to come up with the idea of planting an acorn in the past, and it's a tree in the future. Mm-hmm. And that's where the rippling of dice came in. The idea that it also just works as a cooperative game element. If you're stuck but you're in the past, you can drop dice and go into a support role, and then the people in the future can pick them up. So the rippling dice mechanism, when we hit on that, it was an absolute eureka moment. It was something where we said, this simulates Back to the Future. There's something about this that just feels so, you're bending time, you're doing something different. And it's so simple, but it made such sense. And so we weren't going to invent a game that didn't have time travel in it if it's going to have the name Back to the Future on there. It had to have time travel. So you're jumping through time. And rippling dice, there's another thing that involves the unreliability, unpredictability, but I'll leave the other thing. But that's rippling dice, I think, is the thing that I would say I'm the most proud of in the game, because it works really well.
And I think, like, I've seen the Board Game Geek do the preview of Dice Through Time, and I thought that's that really interesting example of the theme and the mechanic, connecting, where you'd never necessarily think of doing that just mechanically, but because you're trying to solve the question of kind of time travel, it inspires that like mechanic, which makes you go, how else could we use that in other things? And I love that it comes from trying to be true to the idea of Back to the Future and time travel.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
Kevin, what about you? What's your shining moment from the box behind you?
For me, I think it's just the way we handle time travel in relation to how time travel works in Back to the Future. You can't just go from one spot of the board to any spot that you want. It's not like Doctor Who, where you can go anywhere and anywhen. You time travel in one spot, you're going to be in that spot the next year. And the DeLorean doesn't always work right, and it's not easy to time travel. So, that was one of the big conversations we had is, we cannot make it easy for people to time travel. It's got to be a challenge, and for me, kind of hitting that perfect note in the game and echoing it throughout how it works in the films was really kind of cool for me. I love how that worked out.
Can I ask, how do you achieve that difficulty then, like that, or that uncertainty in the game?
Unreliability of the DeLorean.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there were a couple things we did. There's a couple of the cards in the deck that affect the DeLorean, like the starter's not working, or limiting the asides in which the flux capacitor can show up. It's not going to be on half the die. It's going to be on one side of one die. You know what I mean? So that when it gets there, hey, great, we can time travel, but sometimes you can't, and you have to figure out different ways to do it.
And can it ever put you into the wrong time? That's what I'm kind of wondering, is can you accidentally get propelled?
We have one card in there that's it's called Struck by Lightning, and it forces you to time travel to the next year. So if you're in 1955, you're going to 1985. You're 2015, you're going to 1885, stuff like that. So there is something that gives it a little bit more of a randomness to it, which we took right out of the movie. So
yeah.
Ken,
well,
third up.
I would, they both stole the ones that I would pick, but I think one of the things that I'm most proud about in this game, all three movies have to do with lots of things happening at the same time, and you have to pick which to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
The core of the game is making sure this event happens, finding something and delivering it. But the trouble is if you get too focused on that and ignore the other events that are happening, those events get represented by one, then two, then sometimes three cards that make them much messier to deal with. And if you haven't paid attention to those while you're off delivering things, all of a sudden, all hell's breaking loose. Mm-hmm. And the game gets exponentially harder, which to me, I think provides the tension and flavor of all three screenplays. And so I'm proud of the way that we're able to achieve that balance. When people you watch all of the playthroughs that have been on YouTube, and you'll see some of them where, I'm delivering this, and then they go, oh crap, look at what we left behind. And then all of a sudden they're trying to fix that, and sometimes they succeed, and sometimes they just say, we're just screwed, we lose.
That's actually the most fun is when you see people get supremely confident. They're like, we've delivered half the items, we're doing so well, the out of time tracks barely moved, and then they ignored 1955 and it's got paradox markers on it, and suddenly they're jumping halfway up the out of time track, and they're like, wait, what just happened? So they go from like, we got this game's too easy, to what in the world? And then suddenly you click into a different gear and you have to work together to get out of the jam.
Yeah, that's the essence of the Marty on the walkie-talkie. Doc, come in, Doc. Ah! That's what we wanted to have people feel in the game, and I think we succeeded.
I like that idea of
a tail element is always fun.
Yeah, I like the idea of that. What starts off as a fairly simple event becomes more complex. Like that's a nice thing of like you're trying to get the stuff out of the way so you can deal with the actual thing at hand.
Yeah, and it's a choice. It's all about choices, and that's what we wanted. The choice is, do I hurry up and drop off the sports almanac because I can? Or do I step one step over to the left and wipe out this simple event that's here and then take care of the sports almanac on my next turn? Because if you leave that simple event now, by the time you get back to it, if 2 cards have been added to it, now instead of needing 1 die to solve it, you need 4 dice to solve it. And it's a lot. And if Biff has happened to wander over onto that spot, you got to punch him out of the way too. So now you're dealing with this catastrophic situation. But even in those moments, you can ripple dice to help each other. You can, help each other out in different ways, use Mr. Fusion. And so you're never completely out of it, but, until you are, really.
Yeah. I have to tell this story because this is one of my favorite parts of the development. Chris is very good at balance. And when Chris was making the prototypes, he was distributing the different dice faces on the different cards so that all of them were important, except for one. In Lou's Cafe in 2015, if you weren't careful, you had to roll 4 of a kind to get rid of that event.
Cafe 80s. Yep.
That's right. And it's Cafe 80s. Yeah. And I was saying, oh God, we played a card on Cafe 80s. And yeah, it was like a laser focus. We got to watch Cafe 80s. And finally we got that straightened out. But for a while, it was my least favorite part of the game.
Yeah, because you needed fist icons in order to solve. Almost the entire thing was fist icons. Plus, if Biff was there, you needed a fist icon to punch him out of there. So you would suddenly need. It was just violent. It was the most violent spot on the board.
It was like West Side Story meets Back to the Future.
I think one thing I can definitely tell from all three of you is that you are, everybody when they make a game, they are proud of the thing that they've made. But you're also, I think, all three of you are super proud of the fact that you have represented Back to the Future, like a franchise, a story that you all love, but you've done it in a way that all three of you sort of like. It's like, don't think I could have done that much better. Don't think like it's just shining off the three of you, and that makes me super, super happy. Like I said, that when you sort of like subtly let it slip at Gen Con, and it was like, yeah, this is gonna be all right. It's gonna be something.
Yeah. Well, Chris, you got some sort of validation about that, didn't you?
Oh yeah, you got a letter, didn't you?
I got 2 letters. So Bob Gale, who produced and wrote Back to the Future, actually requested from Ravensburger that he get a copy, and that Robert Zemeckis, who directed Back to the Future, would get a copy of the game. Wow. So Cassidy, So when Cassidy got that request, she actually reached out to me and she said, "Chris, would you want to write a letter for us to include in the package that we send to them?" And so I got to compose a letter to the creators of my favorite films of all time. Something that, it's not overstating it to say it's helped define my life. I'm that crazy of a fan. I have a curio cabinet full of memorabilia downstairs. So I got to write a letter to both of them and just thank them and tell them how much it meant. And then we sent those off. And then Robert Zemeckis' wife tweeted a photo of them playing. It was on the table.
Wow.
And then they actually sent letters thanking us. Bob Gale, being a writer, his was very lengthy and effusive and very nice. And his is funny because when he wrote, he said, Back to the Future in games has not always had the best go, especially in video games. That crap NES game. He literally, pooped on the NES.
I have a copy of it. Of course, I have a copy of it.
It was terrible. But he actually put that in there. And then Robert Zemeckis was like 2 sentences and it just said, we thank you so much for keeping the quality and the legacy of Back to the Future going. But both of the guys who created Back to the Future wrote to us to say, thank you, and we appreciate it, and it is part of the legacy. And so
that's it. The sentence where it says, "We are grateful to see this be part of the Back to the Future universe." That's the nice bow on top of the package.
That's you got to get that.
Michael speaking to.
You got to get that on the front of the box with their name underneath it, like part of the Back to the Future universe. Robert Zemeckis.
The official cooperative dice game of Bob Gale and Robert Zemeckis. Yeah. So that was
or just right. It's not that NES game.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, not that crap NES game. Yeah. But that was that went above and beyond anything. Just being able to make the game was amazing. Being able to make it with 2 really close friends and have a wonderful developmental situation happen that allowed us to get even closer was amazing. Having the game come out and be received very well, for people to play it and enjoy it, was amazing. But then having the actual creators of the thing itself, who I've enjoyed, their work for years, send that letter to us to say thank you. This was great. It meant the world.
Our Sunday has like 35 cherries on top.
Yeah.
So I always try to find like one weird question to ask. Mm-hmm. And like from my experience, a lot of IP based games aren't great. I'll be frank, they're not great. And
yes.
And I think it's a rare thing. So to have a game where, the quality, for me, that the gameplay matches what the heart of the IP is. And whilst I've not played the game yet, I've seen the explanation and kind of go, okay, I can see what you're doing there and what you're trying to do and capture in the game. And I have a list of games that I was excited about, and when I played them, Michael, you know what I'm talking about. It was like, oh, man, I really love that, but just doesn't show through in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Why? I'm going to ask from the other perspective. Like, why do you think that happens with IP-based games?
That's a good question.
Well, it was Bob Zemeckis hinted at it in his letter, in that he said so many IP properties we have to hit this on this shelf on this date to make this money.
Mm-hmm.
So let's get there. What happens in between is irrelevant as long as it gets there. So quality control and devotion and hours into it takes a back seat. They want to hit that business, get that swath of money, and then move on to the next marketing. And we weren't interested in that.
And
Ravensburger's not interested in that.
Yeah, I think they're a good company to fight for that. I think you're right. It's the belief is that the IP is sufficient to sell the game. Mm-hmm. And really what happens after that, I've encountered this a lot, where it doesn't really matter what happens afterwards.
Yeah.
You could have put an empty box on there with the IP on it, as long as you tricked people into buying it off the shelf.
Yeah. And I think it comes a lot with putting together the right people with the right things at the right time. So if you're a company that just churns out games and you just get your hands on a license and you give it to the same team of developers, then you're cranking out a Powerpuff Girls game on one hand and a Cheers game on the other hand, and you're doing them simultaneously, and no one on your team particularly cares about Powerpuff Girls. They read the wiki page. They have never seen Cheers, but they just quickly go and binge a few episodes. You might be able to get something good, but it's not going to have the heart, because the team is just doing a job. And there's nothing wrong with that. As a designer, they're probably doing the best they can. You can't infuse something with love if you don't have that love in your heart to begin with, though. You can't simulate that. And so I think with Ravensburger, the way that they do it, where they say, okay, we have the opportunity to make games based on these IPs. Now let's put the feelers out there and see if we can get the right people to make them. I truly believe they probably have had, and I don't know this for a fact, but I believe they've had IPs that they've had access to, but they haven't been able to get someone passionate enough to make it. And so they've moved on to the next one. And that's pretty impressive, because there's money being left on the table there. But I think it's important to make sure that if you're going to change people's perspective on whether a licensed game can be good or not, you can't misstep. You can't say, well, we made Jaws, made Jurassic Park, made Back to the Future. Now we're going to make the Psycho game, and we're just going to give it to Roger, who's never seen Psycho before, because we just need to turn this thing out. They've gotten to the point where they understand how important it is to keep that quality high and that heart infused in there. And they've kept doing that. We're very hopeful to work with them again in the future when the right thing comes up. But we also have seen lists of IPs that are huge, not to name them at all, because I don't want the Ravensburger lawyer to burst through the wall like the Kool-Aid man. But we've seen ones where we're like, this would be amazing to do, but we just, the fans would go crazy, but it's not, none of us are personally invested in it. And so we don't pitch those. And I hope that that's appreciated by everyone, because it's like, well, there's someone out there who's the way we are with Back to the Future, but with whatever that other thing is, they'll get the opportunity and we won't stand in their way.
And I think as you're talking, it kind of reminded me the role that IP games can play if handled properly. Because one, the familiarity of the brand will get it put into the bigger stores like Target and Walmart, and people will look at it because it's a recognizable IP. Usually that's where it stops. and the experience just reinforces a notion in people's head that games are crap or boring or dull. Whereas if you do
Renegade, they signed that thing with Hasbro. They announced it a couple of weeks ago that they're going to be making games based on G.I. Joe,
Transformers,
My Little Pony as well. And like My Little Pony that's my franchise. I'm a 45-year-old middle-aged white guy.
He's a brony.
You're a brony. One of my favorite cartoons of all time. I am gaming's resident brony, I guess, and I'm hopeful that they'll do something really well with it, but I'm also worried that it's just going to be cranked out and that'll do aspect. I've seen it in so many games. The one game that I've ever actually destroyed and set on fire was a Doctor Who game because it was that bloody bad. It was because like you said, Chris, there was no love, there was no care, there was no thought, there was no attention. And I always take it as a slight when somebody takes a thing that I love and really screws it up. I mean, like, The Expanse, for example, Jeff Engelstein did an amazing game based on The Expanse. It's deep, it's hardcore, but still accessible. And I'm glad that happened as opposed to, here's an Expanse trivia game. And it's like, that's always the go-to. And it's just sort of like, no, because then I'll set it on fire, and you don't want me to do that. That's a bad thing.
Hey, I'll just say, there's something about trivia games. We just found out this past week that we won the Blog On award. We came in second place for adult game. And we were like, that's fantastic. We were tied for second place, but that's great. We looked to see who won first place just to see. It was the Friends trivia game.
Still, like 20 years later, you still can't get away from it.
Based on the episode where they win the apartment.
I tell you what, I kind of really want to play it now because it must be really, really good. 20 years later,
like 10 years old.
It's new. I think what it was they found new trivia, all new trivia, never before discovered.
95th season.
Yeah.
Can I fill in a hole in this whole interview if I don't use up too much time?
Mm-hmm.
There's a guy in the top center of this screen who is a loving introvert sandwiched between two raving lunatics in this collaboration.
But we were rose there.
Just like most brilliant introverts, he will come up with, hey, what about this at just the right time and massively improve whatever project we're working on. And I very much value that in Kevin. And I'm bragging on the fact that Kevin and Chris are going to be, there's a game that they put together that's going to be hitting Kickstarter this month. That's not a Ravensburger game, but it's amazing.
They're moving along. He's moving along to the plug portion of this.
No, I'm not. I just want to say to the gaming community, watch Kevin Rodgers. That's all I want to say.
Yeah, this is. I think Kev, this might be your first video interview. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's newer to this. Me and Ken have been around for 78 years.
Well, as they say, I have a face for podcasts. So I mean,
we'll look back on this episode and license it out to somebody.
We interviewed Kevin Rodgers before the 7th Spiel des Jahres in a row. Yeah, I remember greatly.
Before he made the 40th anniversary Friends trivia game.
Yes. We're all drinking sherry.
I think it is important, like when I'm working on IP, that the designers, care enough to push back as well against even the license holders as to what works in the medium, because it's very easy for the licensor to say, oh well, we think this should be a card-based game, and you're like, no, like this, not for this IP. Like there are certain experiences that you can create in this game which would be much better in a different format than just doing the standard thing. And
you criticize my Starship Troopers dexterity game.
No, that kind of makes sense. No, like I'm like a really simple example was in working on the Batman story cubes. DC, well, Warner actually, said to me, well, why is there no Batman on the story cubes? And I was like, well, you've got like 54 icons. Everyone kind of knows Batman is going to be part of the story. Every single icon is precious for the purposes of storytelling. So I'm not going to put him on it. And I had to kind of push back in terms of, again, with the intention being to tell stories, what was the best way to do that? So there's many cases where I'd have to argue why, what was some other, was it Scooby-Doo or Looney Tunes, like why every character didn't appear on the dice, because it was just like, you need certain interactions to happen and you need locations and events and like kind of weird emotions to appear in it. And there's a couple of times I had to say, like, you have to trust that I care a lot about this IP. I don't want to mess it up. And I think if we can see more games hitting shelves like that, it will bring more people in, kind of back into gaming, I would say.
I agree
to those titles.
Yeah, I think that needle's moving, but I agree.
Well, I guess we should probably wrap this extravaganza up, but I will pitch one final question, if that's cool with folks. Last week on the show, Rory and I, we sort of were talking about favorite stuff, and we also did a bit of an Ask Us Anything thing. And the question did come up about what IPs would we like to design within. My choice was Star versus Forces of Evil. Rory, your one was...
I can't remember.
It was Growing Pains with Kirk Cameron.
Full House, the card game. But for you three, like individually, like what would you like if you had your druthers, if you had like access to literally every single IP that was out there, what would you pick?
Go ahead,
Kevin. I'm going to put you on the spot first.
You want me to go?
Yeah, you go first.
Kevin's going to go first.
Go for it, Kevin.
Oh, here he's got visual aids.
Let me grab my wand here. I would have to say I think Harry Potter would be up there. I've got, you can't see right here, but I've got all my Harry Potter stuff kind of going right here. If you take this down, you'll see my picture of the trio and all kinds of good stuff. So yeah, Harry Potter for me is the is my Back to the Future the way Chris was for him.
So Kevin, do you have like a rotating shelf depending on who you're talking to? You press this button and all the Back to the Future spins around and go, well, I'd like to talk to you about Harry Potter today.
He has a variety of houses. He just goes to the house that he needs to be at.
Yeah, I used to work in a movie theater. So I've got like all the posters, and actually down here I've got the wall-sized banners and things like that for Harry Potter.
Oh, cool.
For me, it's definitely Harry Potter. That's my that would be my dream one.
I've got a story about that IP, which I will tell you when the show is finished, because it is quite the wild ride again. Ken, how about you? What would be your big one?
Well, again, I can't pick a particular IP because that's not what got me into game design. Why I like Back to the Future, because it falls along this arc. My passion is, before I leave this planet, to create a game where the winning strategy is making positive relationships, building friendships across the table, building friendships on the table. So that's why I like cooperative games so much. So ones that model the concept of true selfless love to other human beings, because I think that is a vastly underrepresented meme on our planet, and so that's where I'm going.
It's very noble, but you're a very noble dude. So
well, thank you.
Well, I will throw it. I think Ken, we think about similar things, and the challenge with that I always find is how to model that so it's intentional rather than for the sake of winning the game. Because as soon as it becomes a requirement of the game, things like that, people will say, well, I'll do that thing because it'll win me the game. And you've just undermined the whole reason for...
I would be happy to show you a tabletop simulator mod in the next few days, because we're very close. I think Chris can certify that.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So
That's shameless plug number 2. Okay, you're using them all up now, Ken.
I didn't give any names, no IPs. Although if any publishers would like to contact me, I'd be happy to take your call.
Chris, how about you? What's your? I mean, obviously, Back to the Future is like
that's the brass ring.
for you.
That's the brass ring. So my second big one, because it's been horribly underrated and underused and underutilized. And you mentioned Renegade. I would love to see a good Back to the Future. I'm looking at Kev's shirt. A Transformers game. A Transformers game that now I'm not big into miniatures. I like deck building games and RPGs, which is the way that Renegade's going to go. RPGs and deck builders. But I mean, the opportunity to actually have pawns that are like little mini Transformers, and I'm Optimus Prime, and I can become a truck, and then I can move and do different things. There's just an opportunity there. It's Hasbro, for crying out loud. It's just begging to be made. So I always wanted to do that. But the other one, and Kevin and I have said this before, if we were ever given just a fortune and we could make the game that we wanted to make, we would make a Quantum Leap game.
Yep.
That would be the IP.
Another basically time traveling game. Look at you.
It is. But there's so many things you could do with a Quantum Leap game, and it could be deep, it could be suspenseful, it could be action packed. We've discussed that a little bit. Plus, it's such an amazing show and great IP.
It needs to be a living card game.
There you go. See, because then you add in new scenarios, new leaps.
You start off basic.
Right.
Yes, you start off because your Swiss cheese memory, and it needs to be filled in. And then Al shows up and gives you information, and then you have to interact with things. I would love to do Quantum Leap. So Kevin and I have talked about that we would love to get the rights to be able to. Well, I think the thing was we were gonna actually make a movie, a reunion movie with the money. But I think we could change that to board game at this point, or card game.
But I think this is the thing with IPs.
Shush, Ken Grazier. Time Stories is not Quantum Leap. There's no Al and Ziggy.
Doesn't have the heart. With IPs, a lot of them are kind of nostalgia fests to some degree, and you're selling it on that basis. And I think that's the thing for me with working with an existing IP. Like, what's the intention kind of behind it, and is there really an audience there? Are the audience going to play it, or are they going to put it on their shelf? Because like when I talk to certain companies about licensing, they'd be like, oh yeah, well, people will buy 2 copies of the game, one to play and one to stick on the shelf. I'm like, but I don't want that one on their shelf. I want it to be so played and not bought as a commodity thing.
It's the Toy Story thing, right? A toy is meant to be played with. The game is meant to be played, for crying out loud.
So I think you could, Quantum Leap, there's a certain generation of people who know that, and it was fairly niche at the time, I think, as well.
Why are you trying to destroy my dreams, Rory?
No, but I'm saying that's what I do. You can take that. What I mean is, it doesn't have to be Quantum Leap. It's like it doesn't have to be based on the IP. You can take.
So you're saying that it could be that thing where people play it and go, "This is essentially Quantum Leap the game." It's not Quantum Leap the game, but it's essentially Quantum Leap the game.
It's inspired by Quantum Leap, but you've taken it so much further. Because if you don't take it further, then just do it as Quantum Leap.
How do I
don't confine yourself to Quantum Leap?
Oh, that's true. That's true. You asked about an IP though, so get off my back.
I've just written myself a note. Okay.
Go to 2019. Force Rory to binge Quantum Leap.
There you go.
I don't have time to binge.
We're going to wrap it up there. I think that's a good point to do it. So we will do the across the board plug fest extravaganza. Chris, if people want to hunt you down like the dog you are, how can they do so?
I can be found right outside their window. I'm looking at them right now.
Nice. Power of time travel. Be everywhere whenever you need to be.
I am on Twitter @leader88. Boom, just like it says down there. I am on Facebook, but that's pictures of my kids mostly. I work for Calliope Games, so if you know what Calliope Games publishes and you want to publish games with us, I am the gatekeeper there. So Chris@CalliopeGames.com. But do some research, because we do have some criteria of the games that we publish. I always have to tell people that, because I will immediately get 2-player games, or I will get like the deepest strategy games, and I'll be like, you don't know what Suro is or Roll4. We don't publish that type of game.
I'm sure, Chris, you're like, does this game make me look good or make me look bad?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so that's where I can be found. And as far as what, I don't know if you're talking about plugs, what we're doing next, I'll leave it to Kev to talk about that, though. Kev.
Cool. Kevin, you're up next.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, that's me down there at Twitter. You can find me there. I am on Facebook too, but again, I that's mostly Chris's kids, so I mean that's really all I put on there. So,
okay, that just sounds weird, but
yeah.
I'll allow it.
Next up for us is Chris and I have a game called Mass Transit for Calliope that's going to be on Kickstarter in a couple weeks. It's another cooperative game, limited communication game, where you're trying to get people from the big city to their homes by building different kind of routes to do that. And there it is.
Ooh, nice.
It's a lot of fun, and in true Calliope fashion, it's for everyone. So definitely check that one out when it comes out on Kickstarter. You'll enjoy it.
Cool. And last, but of course, by no means least, the gentleman of gaming, the one, the only, Ken Franklin.
The elder statesman.
Yeah, somebody called me the elder statesman of gaming, and I went, "What are you smoking?" I can be found on Twitter, Instagram as Ken Blainstegren. Facebook is more personal things, although I keep track of a lot of gaming groups there. It's just by my name. I've got a lot of games at publishers being evaluated, including a certain British concern that I'm crossing my fingers on.
I don't know what you're talking about, because we're Irish.
No, then now it's completely done.
And there goes.
Okay, I'll be expecting the package with the prototype back, probably burned by Michael. Okay.
The game is burned.
I promise you, it's 5,000 times better than the Doctor Who one that I played.
Okay. And I'm just enjoying each day as it comes. I don't have a particular project that's getting ready to be published, but I've got some that I'm hoping will be.
Good stuff. Rory, of course, you can find him, should you so desire, at Rory O'Connor. And, of course, I am at Idle Michael across the board. And, yeah, we'll be back. Me and him will be back on Friday for another Prisma Arena extravaganza.
Prisma Arena?
Yeah, Prisma, you might have heard of it.
I've heard of it, but I don't have one in my hands. How can I change that?
You can pre-order it from our website.
Hang on.
I'm so excited.
Actually, if you pre-order it from your local retailer in the US, you should be able to pre-order it with a special promo figure and some extra stickers as well. So I would order it through your local store.
Yeah.
Not that anyone listening to this needs to hear this, because I'm sure you've already bought into the Hub Kool-Aid, but Prisma Arena is freaking awesome. And yeah, everybody needs to own it, and everyone needs to play it with people, because it's one of those games that once you play it, you're hooked, and then you're going to want to just share it with everybody. And then you're going to be able to decorate your little fighters, and you're going to have some fun. So I cannot wait to be able to play that game again. It's been way too long since I've gotten a chance to play it.
You played a very rough prototype.
It was, and even in rough prototype form, it was a blast. And then
Chris is a rough prototype player.
I'm just rough in general.
Yeah.
Definitely rough.
Especially in the hair.
If you get a chance, we've been playing every week. We're 4 games now. No, 6 games in.
Yeah. Next week, next 7th.
And so we've been leveling up our characters. We've been gaining Prisma powers along the way. And you can see, just like that last game we played last week, just highlights the 2 extremes of how accessible the game is to get into, and then how tactical it can become when you start gaining Prisma powers. Because we were fighting for every single point in that last game.
And when is it due to release to retail?
It's hitting retail in November 13th.
Nice. Nice. Be a good game to play while being confined to quarters in our home.
Exactly.
A wonderful Thanksgiving or Christmas gift. And if we're going to do this properly, hang on a second. So, if you'd like to pre-order a copy of the game, you can head to wearehubgames.com/shop/Prisma-Arena. And that'll be absolutely lovely if you were to do so. Thank you very much indeed.
This advertisement brought to you by the cars behind Michael's shoulder.
Yeah, but listen to it all day. It's an absolute banger of an album.
Let's go.
Cool. So yes, we'll be back on Friday, me and him. Chris, Kevin, Ken, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah.
Thank you for having all of us.
Your passion.
We're honored.
Thank you very much.
So glad to be able to talk to you guys. We miss you. Can't wait until we can see you in person again.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
It'll happen. It'll be a good thing. Mwah, mwah, mwah. Cool. So this is where we will now all wave, and then the broadcast will end.
And then say quiet.
Goodbye. Farewell. I just need to switch off certain things. There we go. Goodbye. Goodbye.